Welcome back. WW Fly Corvair. Thought for the day. Aviation wasn't meant to be Disneyland. If there's one thing that my 31 years in light aviation has taught me was there's a difference in the expectation of my youth spent admiring aviators, both my father's friends who were naval aviators, and aviation in general in America, which seemed to be the land of individuals, accomplishments, outside the norm, people who wanted to live a life that had a little bit more adventure in it. Everything I learned in my youth. Saw The Spirit of St. Louis. Thought it was a fantastic movie, even as a little kid. As a very young teenager, George Peppard in the Blue Max and Ursula Andress. I think everybody can remember the first time they saw that, if you're right in the head. But in general, in my youth, I understood that Pappy Boyington was exactly his measure of what was fun, was a valid judge of what a good time in aviation was. Just what Lindbergh's sense of adventure was, that you should have your own sense of adventure. Somewhere along the line, in the 1980s and certainly in the 1990s, you get an effect I call the Sporty's Pilot Catalog. And unfortunately, some of the EAA went along with this too. And it's where it's trying to turn the EAA and experimental aviation into a Disneyland type adventure, where nothing's ever offensive and everybody's dressed like they're a refugee from J. Crew catalog, and everybody's wearing cardigans and they have just the right kind of dog and the 2.3 kids. Not that there's anything wrong if you love cardigans and you love golden retrievers and everything. Great, I'm happy for you and everything. But I really detest the idea that there's a particular look that people have to enter aviation. We've steered away decades of potential builders and participants in aviation just because the people that are in charge of projecting an image have decided that we're going to clean this whole thing up. The most colorful characters I ever knew in person in aviation, they just didn't conform to that. They were there to have a good time. They judged people in aviation by how reliable and solid they were and what they knew. They didn't go around caring what people looked. Nobody I ever knew who I considered a mentor of mine ever wore a cardigan in aviation. I don't know anybody who shopped and looked like they were out of a J. Crew catalog. Everybody I knew in aviation who was an interesting person who taught me a lot of stuff just came from outside the mold of suburbia. I think there's a lot of stuff where consumer society finds it easiest to market stuff to people if you can get them all to be alike, and then they'll all want to buy the same mass-produced thing when the signal is sent out through advertising. Aviation was supposed to be different than that. Aviation is supposed to be the land of individuals. If you look at America, and no offense to my brethren overseas who may be watching this, but my perspective on aviation is there are a lot of great aviators from all around the world, but Americans were particularly good at this. And the reason why, the Wright brothers started this. It was used as the decisive factor in World War II, and America goes to land on the moon in 1969. And the reason why a lot of these experiences were American experiences is because we had a country where we didn't judge people by class standards. We judged them by their capability. We didn't judge them by how they looked. We judged them by what they knew. And aviation, the best part of it, is still the same way. So if you're out there and you look at this stuff and you think, wow, public image of general aviation is, from the Sporty's Pilot Catalog, I've never gone to an airport and had a good time with anybody who looked anything like they were modeling for the Sporty's catalog. Everybody I knew was much more realistic, down-to-earth guy, many more interesting people that just don't fit that mold. And when you look at the Americans that made a difference in aviation, the Wright brothers were not the university industry guys. They were two guys determined to unlock the puzzle of flight. When you look at guys like Neil Armstrong, You take a look at Neil Armstrong. If you were one of the people fortunate enough to see him at an air show in the last years of his life, he most certainly did not look like he came out of a J. Crew catalog. All along the way, what was done by important people was done by people who knew stuff and people who wanted to do stuff and had a desire to do it correctly. That's all that matters. It doesn't have a look, it doesn't have a style, it has a characteristic called capability. What we're doing at Fly Corvair is increasing your capability to be an intelligent owner, operator, and builder of the engine that will power your home build. It doesn't have a look, it has an attitude, and it has a desire to learn. Thanks very much. WW Fly Corvair.